Hi everyone, I'm Leanne and today I'm going to be answering some questions about my 2025 reading. I was back at work this week and it feels like we are just fully back into the swings of normal life, and I am not ready to let go of so much of the joy that I felt between Christmas and New Year. I'm really trying to carry in the rest and relaxation into the new year, and I haven't quite let go of 2025 yet. I've already seen my best books of the year video, and coming up I have videos on my stats and then also my reading intentions and more broadly my life intentions for 2026. So there's lots of that kind of content still coming up this month. Today I'm going to be answering some questions that are from the end of the year book tag, which was created by a booktuber named Laura. I'll leave her video linked down below. We're going to be talking about a bunch of the books that I read in 2025. Some of them will be books that I spoke about in my best books of the year video, but this will also give me a chance to talk about a few others, and we're not going to be as stat heavy as I will be in the next video, where we will be getting into the pie charts, the percentages, the data. It starts off with most disappointing read of the year, kind of gets that one out of the way. I don't really like to trash talk books, so I'm going to keep this very brief, but my most disappointing read of the year was The Husbands. And I think the reason why I was so disappointed in this one is just because it should have been one that I really loved. I really found the premise intriguing. So this is about a woman that comes back to her house and there is a man there that is claiming to be her husband, and every piece of evidence that she can find, including photos in her home and her own social media accounts, suggests that he is telling the truth. And what actually transpires is that every time Anne goes into the attic generates her a new husband, and her entire life, only in the present day, but her history is rewritten based on that different husband. I really enjoy kind of contemporary romance stories with a heavy speculative twist. I really enjoy those, but this one was one where I just saw that premise was far better than the actual execution of the story. Next question is, what is an underhyped book that you read in 2025? And for me, that is Les Normaux. It is a new adult graphic novel that is set in an alternate magical Paris with werewolf characters and vampire characters, and it is about this kind of bunch of young people, but predominantly focused on a romance between two male characters who meet on a night out and kiss and think they are never going to see each other again until the next day they realize that they are actually neighbors. And we're following the brewing romance between the pair of them, but also a host of side characters in their lives. It's super queer. I loved the art style. There was such a breadth in the representation of queerness in this book as well. And it is one that I think has gone under the radar, but I really enjoyed. The next question is an overhyped book, and I feel like the people are going to come for me. I did not like Hamnet. It's a super unpopular opinion, but I just didn't get it. There's so much buzz around it at the minute because the film has just come out, and I will definitely go and see the film. I didn't hate the book, but I'm not sure I would be so excited to see the film if it wasn't that Jessie Buckley was the lead in it, and to a lesser extent Paul Mescal. You just kind of want to be part of the discourse because I feel like everyone is going to see the film. But I didn't love the book. And maybe it was a writing style thing that I didn't quite get on with. I also think some of the choices that were made around Agnes as a character actually made her less interesting to me, when the whole point was kind of showcasing that she was just as important and interesting as her famous husband was. I think some of the choices that were made actually undermines that entire premise. Next question is a book you loved at the time but don't think much about now. And in many ways this feels like a deeply unfair question. I look back on some of the books that were my favorites of the first half of the year and weren't my favorites of the second half of the year. And I think it probably would be Big Date Energy by Bethany Rutter. This is about a woman navigating the dating scene in London, and she's dating lots of different people. She's dating men and women, and I loved the kind of reclamation made for being a greedy bisexual. I love that it kind of flipped that stereotype that bisexuals so often rally against, and kind of just reclaimed it in a really positive way. Definitely aspects of that book that I really, really love, and I found it thoroughly entertaining, but it's just not one that I've spent loads of time really thinking about since. It was super fun, and I think that's evidence that this book is highly successful at what it set out to do, because I think it is just like a very thoroughly entertaining book, but it's not one that I've been like ruminating on for the remainder of the year. But I don't think that's the point or purpose of that book. Next question is my favorite book couples. I'm really bad with names, especially in books, and you're just gonna have to trust me when I say I've read these books. I just have no idea what the characters are called. First book that I read in 2025 was Honey and Spice, and I love the dynamic between the two lead characters in that book. Their chemistry was really great. I think the way they pushed each other's buttons and got on each other's nerves without it being just annoying to watch these two people grate on each other. So they were just really well matched. And there is a follow-up that has both of these characters. I think it's called Sweet Heat, and I would love to revisit them. I think the paperback is coming out this year. I really loved the main couple in Enemies to Lovers, so this was the only romance book that I featured in my top 10 reads of last year. Again, the chemistry was extremely believable. The setup was really compelling. They were enemies, but in a way that I found really believable and wasn't like Enemies to Lovers romances that I've read before, where there seems to be no actual reason why they hate each other, and it's also resolved very quickly. I just totally believed the vibes between the two of them, and I found them compelling as individuals too. Also want to shout out the couple from Highly Suspicious and Unfairly Cute. This was a young adult romance that I read towards the end of last year, and it wasn't a romance that I really, really loved because I just found it quite juvenile, which is fine because it's a young adult romance. But I did find them a very interesting couple to be together, and it captured kind of teenage miscommunication and confusion really well. I thought the characters were crafted compellingly as individuals, but also when you put them together, they were such a good fit. I don't think it's a coincidence that all of those couples are from romances that aren't American. I found that I'm not really getting on with romances that are set in America very much. The next question is my favorite main characters of the year, and I'm gonna say all of the girls from Thirst Trap. I did say that if I had to pick an absolute favorite book of the year, I would pick this one. It just felt like all of the girls in that book, I could see elements of so many women that I know in each of them. And they were at kind of circumstances and crossroads in their lives that I felt like I really resonated with and connected with. I felt like these were girls that I knew, or girls that I would be friends with. So them as a group, I think, are my favorite main characters of the year. Book that you cannot stop recommending. For me, this is Evenings and Weekends by Oisin McKenna. This is another one that I spoke about in my best books of the year video, so I'm not going to talk about it too much. But I do feel like this is a book that I would just recommend to so many different readers in my life. Actually, I say that. It's a book that I would recommend to so many of my friends that don't read. I would particularly recommend it to gay men living in London. Like, that's a very specific like demographic of people that I think should read this book. I would also just recommend it like really broadly. And it's definitely a book that can really consume you, really suck you in. It's not a short book, but I think it's one that you can read really quickly. I know so many people that read it like cover to cover over the course of a day. And I also think with the Irish Readathon coming up, it's one that I'm going to be recommending a lot for that. The next question is a book that surprised you, and for this I'm going to say An Absolutely Unremarkable Thing by Hank Green. So I have followed Hank Green for like well over a decade on the internet, was a big Vlogbrothers fan, and I still dip in and out. Obviously have read a lot of John Green books over the years as well. And Hank's debut fiction novel came out a number of years ago, and I was just never really compelled to pick it up. I'm just not sure it was a topic that was going to interest me that much. It was quite like sci-fi, kind of about internet culture, and I just wasn't sure that I was going to enjoy that. And yes, the book is like sci-fi and about internet culture, but it is about so much more beyond that. It's about how people arbitrarily attach meaning to things. It's about herd mentality. It is about division between like different demographics in society. It is about how things can really snowball on the internet. It is about how people decide what a person's identity is before they've even had the opportunity to figure out their identity for themselves. It's a book about fear and misunderstanding of the unknown. I just wasn't expecting to get so much out of it, and it's a book that I still think about a lot. The next question is my new favorite author, and I was really sure throughout so much of the year that this was actually going to be E.M. Forster. And then at the 11th hour in November, I went to my boyfriend's house and had forgotten to bring any books with me. To be fair, I don't normally bring books. I bring my Kindle, and I forgot my Kindle. I was forced to either not read or pick up the books that his mother had been encouraging me to read. And I didn't want to read these books, very simply just because I have so many unread books that I own. I didn't want to start borrowing any. But I was like, well, it's either I read these or I don't read anything. So I read The Locked Door by Frida McFadden. I read it cover to cover one morning in bed, and then the next day I read another one of her books cover to cover on the train. And then in December I read 2 more of her books, and now I am hooked. I have no interest in figuring out whether these books are like good quality. I have no interest in like engaging with them critically. I am just so thoroughly enjoying picking up a book and reading it cover to cover in basically one sitting. Having the best time. I'm gonna read so many more of her books. Until I get tired of them, I'm gonna keep reading them. The next question is the saddest book that I read in 2025. And I think this is probably The Boy I Love, which is a young adult book about the relationship between 2 teenagers, both enlisted in the British Army during the First World War. Whilst it's a young adult book, it definitely doesn't shy away from some of the terrors that these young men faced as part of that conflict. And also so many of the challenging attitudes towards queerness at this point in time, and particularly within those institutions. It's really heartbreaking to read about. There are so many upsetting things that happen in this book, but I thought it was a brilliant book. Next question is my favorite book cover of the year. One that springs to mind is this edition of The Wizard of Oz that I read in December. It has this gorgeous green cloth bound cover and this foiled front, and it has these amazing pink sprayed edges as well. So whilst it's The Wizard of Oz, not Wicked, they are definitely going for that Wicked theme, and it totally worked on me. When I saw this in the shop, I was like, this needs to come home with me, and I think it is stunning. Question is the best audiobook I listened to in 2025, and I actually do so much of my reading via audiobook. No way I would read as much as I do or reduce my TBR in any kind of way if it wasn't for audiobooks. They form such a significant portion of my reading, but I don't actually note down which of my books that I listened to as opposed to like reading physically with my eyes. So sometimes it can be difficult to remember, like, did I listen to this or did I read this? And sometimes I actually do switch between the two. I get all of my audiobooks from my library. I don't pay for any kind of subscription, and I think it's wild when people actually do. Like, I understand the benefits of being subscribed to something in the sense that you have, I guess, a far broader selection and you can read like brand new releases, or you're not kind of waiting for a loan to become available in the way you might with your library services. But with your library services, you can get like an unlimited amount of audiobooks and they are free. Just don't understand that trade-off of like, yes, they might not have everything at your library, and yes, you might need to wait a little while, but for me, it is just not worth having a subscription when I have so much content available free of charge. But anyway, I'm going to answer the question now, because the audiobook that does really stick in my mind, Nesting by Roisin O'Donnell, I think this audiobook was really brilliantly done. I think the main character in this book is someone that you naturally do kind of resonate with and connect with. But I think because the narrator of this story did such a superb job, that even increased that for me, because I was listening to her, I was hearing her. And one of the things that I found so impressive about this audiobook as well was how the narrator did the children's voices. I was really impressed by that as well. So we have the longest book that I read and the shortest book that I read. The longest book that I read in terms of page numbers was Only on the Weekends by Dean Atta. But like in terms of word count and like time spent reading, this definitely wasn't the longest book I read. This is a young adult book that is told in verse. If it was like looking at word count, this definitely wouldn't be the longest. I don't know what that would be. Bear with. Oh, so Storygraph actually thinks my longest book of the year was Sushi for Beginners. This doesn't match with what I have on my reading spreadsheet, but I guess is the definitive answer of the longest book because it is not written in verse. So this would be the longest book that I read last year. And then the shortest book I read was So Late in the Day by Claire Keegan, which was 47 pages. A book you cannot stop thinking about. For me, this is A New Age of Sexism by Laura Bates. This was the one nonfiction book that made my top 10 books of the year list. And it is a book about the intersections of evolving technology, in particular in relation to artificial intelligence, and how that intersects with misogyny and sexism, and how dangerous those two things coexisting is without proper legislation. It's a book that is hugely informative. It is startling and scary, but I think it is so important to be armed with the information that there is in this book. And I can't stop thinking about it because of that importance. It is a book that has really stayed with me and I want to push more and more people to read. And these topics are inescapable in the modern age. Next question is a book with a unique concept, and for this I'm going to say She's Always Hungry by Eliza Clark. This was the one short story collection that I had on my top 10 list, and every single story in this collection was super unique. It was unlike anything that I'd ever read before. So people who read a bit more like weird, creepy fiction might not think it's as unique as I do, but for me it was so different to anything else that I read. Some of the stories, I don't know how you would even begin to come up with them, so it definitely felt unique to me. Next is a book you would like to reread, and for me this is Open Water. So I read this book and I liked it, but I didn't love it as much as other people seem to, and I actually think this is one where listening to it on audio didn't help. I actually feel like I would have got so much more from it had I spent a bit more time like with the pages, if I'd taken it much slower rather than like listening to the audiobook. And I think that would have given me the space to appreciate the writing a bit more as well if it was like physically in front of me. And for those reasons, and because it is so short, I think it's definitely one that I would like to reread. Next question is a book that got you out of a reading slump, and I don't think I had any reading slumps in 2025. It was just a very consistent year in terms of my reading. I was enjoying my reading throughout the year. There was no point where I was finding it challenging to read, but I would definitely say that going back to Frida McFadden, that experience of reading The Locked Door in one sitting, cover to cover, was one that gave me a lot of momentum going into the final few weeks of 2025. It got me really hooked on reading. Just knowing that you can read something that quickly was such a positive for me. For a book I wish that I'd got to this year, I'm going to say Uncharmed by Lucy Jane Wood. I pre-ordered this one and I didn't get round to reading it, even though it was one of my most anticipated reads of the year. So I would definitely like to read that fairly early on in 2026. I'm really surprised that I didn't get around to reading it. Next question is a book you started and didn't finish by the end of the year. And this is First Time Caller for me. I read a couple of chapters of this towards the end of the year and I was like, do you know what? I'm just going to wait until the new year so I can fully immerse myself in this rather than having it like straddling between December and January. There's something about that I don't enjoy. So I kind of just hit pause after I read those first few chapters and I am now returning back to it. The final question is about your reading goals for 2026, but I have a full video coming up on that. So the next video you're going to see from me is going to be looking at all of my reading stats for the year. As I said, there will be lots of data, percentages, graphs, and then based on my findings in that video, we are going to put together our 2026 reading goals. So there will be a full video talking about those. Let me know if you read any of the books I mentioned, what you thought of them. If you want to let me know you're here but you don't have anything in particular to say, leave me some sort of celebration emoji to celebrate the new year. That is it from me. I hope you're well and I'll speak to you in my next video.